Other than acknowledging that children are people, how do you think those of us without children contribute to the solution? The solution being ending the systemic discrimination, dehumanization of children in our culture, which results in all kinds of trauma, and I argue is the basis of almost every shitty thing that happens in this country. It can all trace back to childhood trauma. Hurt people. The shame, abuse, and powerlessness that children experience creates lasting trauma, maladaptive behaviors, and cycles of abuse. For full context, go watch that whole video. But I think this is such a good question because it's not just the role of parents. It's not just the obligation of parents to protect kids. Kids are human beings and members of our society. They are not property of their parents. They are not extensions of their parents. And just as it is the responsibility of every single person in America to work to end the oppression of every marginalized group, to vigorously defend the humanity of other folks in our society. Children are not an exception simply because they are under 18, simply because they happen to be born after you. When we see ending the oppression of children, working to reduce childhood trauma as purely the obligation of parents, we continue to perpetuate the false notion that children are property. And I think it does a real disservice to everybody in community to devalue the role of non-parental, non-familial adults in the lives of kids, and to dismiss the value and richness that comes from having relationships with children that are not your own. Adults can and should have meaningful relationships with kids that are not their progeny. This is not a foreign concept in other cultures, but damn, America is so toxically individualistic. And not only that, but parents are so suspicious and tend to view their children as their own possessions to the extent that they get angry. They're concerned there's something nefarious going on if a person, an adult, comes and talks to their kids. I mean, that plays into all my videos on conspiracy theories around stranger danger. Obviously, I would say the number one thing that non-parents can do, which I will admit is tricky in a society where laws don't seem to hold any meaning and the system of checks and balances and our trust in government is completely eroded, but is to vote for officials who uphold the human rights of kids, who understand the unique oppression that children experience, and to advocate for the needs of children in our society. Vote for candidates that understand the humanity of children and advocate for their human rights. So many other countries basically have like a kid's bill of rights, codifying into law the extension of the United Nations human rights to all people, including people under 18. The second thing that I think non-parents can do is speak up when folks dehumanize children, when folks use slurs to refer to children, when folks use child status as a slur to refer to adults. Shut that shit down. When folks make jokes at kids' expense, when folks bitch and complain about child behavior, shut that shit down. In another video where a vegan was like, don't get mad at me for problematic vegans, I said, you police your own community. If other vegans are making you look bad, then you need to take them to task. If they are engaging in behavior that you don't feel represents you and your community, then take them to task. And I think the same is true here. Adults need to hold other adults accountable and be like, that's not funny. Actually, that kid's not being a brat. They're not being naughty. It looks to me like they're really struggling. They're overtired. And then I feel that leads into the third thing that non-parents can do, which is to learn about child development. I think because we live in such an individualistic culture and in a culture where children are really segregated from adults and community, they're in childcare and then they're in school for 8+ hours a day, which are peer stratified environments. Most of us as adults, especially if we don't have a faith-based community, have very little interaction with children unless we are parents ourselves. And even then, the majority of our working day for most of us is spent separated from children. So learning what is normal developmental behavior, learning how kids' brains and bodies work, can help us understand not only all of the ways that they are disenfranchised, but the ways that our society is constructed, our public spaces, even like our furniture, are all built on adult scales and to meet adult needs, and how this sets kids up for failure. We create expectations and we design our society in a way that adds extra challenges for children, denies them access. Every single setting that children navigate in society, unless it's like a preschool classroom, lacks equity for kids. And we also need to understand that adults put superhuman expectations on children. We expect more self-control, more self-discipline out of little kids than we expect out of adults. And we misinterpret children's overwhelm, their overtiredness, their emotional dysregulation, their lack of cognitive ability, their lack of physical ability with naughtiness, disruptiveness, brattiness. We place negative connotations on children's limitations. We shame and ridicule kids for their limitations and for the ways that we set them up to fail. Again, I will say, how would you feel doing that to a disabled person? demeaning them when they get frustrated because they cannot access things the way that able-bodied people can. That is children's everyday lived experience in American society. So voting for policymakers, policy change, not giving tacit approval to childism, being a vocal advocate for kids, learning and understanding child development and behavior. Those are 3 big things. And then the 4th thing is something that I think everybody in America needs. I have made so many videos on it, which is to build our distress tolerance skills. Kids can be loud, smelly, annoying. Their distress distresses us. I mean, evolutionarily, that's how it's supposed to be. We should be responding with empathy and care, stepping in to intervene when we see a child in distress. Kids crying is supposed to get our hackles up so that we come in and help them. We come alongside them and help them work through the distress that they're feeling. But we are so disconnected from our own emotions and from children that we don't even understand our own evolutionary urges anymore. We get pissed off and angry, we feel distressed, and we want to stop our own distress, not by helping kids work through theirs, not by supporting them so they can resolve what they're going through and get their needs met, but we just want to shut them down as quick as possible. So I would argue building distress tolerance skills, learning that our comfort does not supersede a child's right to exist. We don't have a right to comfort over a child's right to access, over a child's right to be treated like a human. Yeah, so I really, really appreciate this question. I think that it is the role of every adult in society to change the way that we treat kids, and that I think the benefits will be endless. I think almost every problem in our society could be solved if we learned to treat children like human beings, members of our community. We could mitigate and eliminate so much trauma, so many cycles of abuse. Selfishly, the benefit is not just for kids. This is not purely altruistic behavior. This is for the good of us as adults and for our entire society. I think it is requisite if we are going to rescue us from the fascism that we have slid into. If we want to protect women from abusive partners, let's stop perpetuating the cycles that create abusive men in the first place. If we want to protect kids from child abuse, let's break the cycles that create child abusers. Understanding the oppression of children, working to end it, working to uphold the dignity and humanity of kids benefits everybody in society. And I am so grateful that non-parents understand that and want to work toward that goal.